This is Jacob Nazarenko with a quick Blender tutorial on how to animate a camera to go over textured planes in Blender. And you can use either maps or images, whatever you want your camera to look at and go over in Blender as a texture on top of a plane. So I'll show you how to do that. Well, first, go and download Blender at blender.org. So you can download their latest version here. I highly suggest using the executable installation because that'll install to the right location and you'll have the icon on your desktop right away. So go and install that. And once you have it installed, you'll have Blender right here. Go into Blender, start up like this. And you're going to click A twice on your keyboard. That'll select everything, and you're going to click the delete key and select delete. So that'll erase everything from your scene, and that's what we want right now. You're going to have a blank grid right now, and what you're going to do is you're going to go to create over here. You're going to see a lot of options, but don't get scared. Blender takes a while to learn, but if you follow the right procedure, you can do some really, really cool stuff. So go over to the left here and select plane. That's going to create a plane. And what you're going to want to do is click select the S key on your keyboard and drag your mouse from the center outwards. And you're going to notice that that's going to scale it. And so you're going to want it to be, well, the size is kind of arbitrary at this point. So just make it about this big, just have the edges touch the outside edges of the grid. So that looks good. And what you're going to want to do next is create a camera. And that's also in this Create tab over to the left here. You're going to create a camera. And what you're going to see is that this camera is actually comes up under the plane. But you can use these axis arrows to drag objects around in Blender, and just drag it up for now. And see this little plus right here on this side? You're going to click and drag that out, and you're going to see another menu pop up. And what you're going to do is for now, set the X and Y of the camera to 0, and you can also drag it around using these, and just if you're dragging something and you see that you're doing something wrong, just press escape and it snaps it back to its previous position. So select, and the Z right now, don't touch the Z. You can change the height later when you're doing your animation. So for now, make sure that you set the rotation, the X and Y rotation to 0, and actually also set the Z rotation to 0. And so that'll turn the camera this way. That's exactly what we want because the green is the y-axis, the x is the x-axis. And now what you're going to do is select the plane. Make sure you have the plane selected. And you can drag this out a little bit. And what you're going to do is go over to this menu tab right here. And when you mouse over, it's going to say Material. That's the Material tab right there. And click New. That's going to create a new material for your plane. And what you're going to do now is, everything's fine. What you're just going to want to do is set the diffuse amount. You can either just drag or type, set it to 1, and set the specular to 0. And that's all you need to do right now in the Material tab. Next, go over to the Texture tab. It's right next to it. Mouse over it. It's going to say Texture. Click on that, and select New. Now, if this type of texture comes up in anything other than image or movie, make sure that just click on the drop down and make sure that it is set to image or movie. It's right here. This is what we need right now. And select open. So what that's going to do is that's going to allow you to open an image. And I just went ahead and I downloaded let's see, Blender tutorial. I just went ahead and I downloaded a subway map for Boston subway map, and that's what I'm going to use, and that's what I'm going to have in my animation, and that's what I'm going to have my camera go over in my animation. So close that. And so you're going to open that. You're going to open whatever image you want to use on top of your plane. And you'll see that you'll see it come up in this window right here. And now, if you go down, you'll see that it repeats this image. It'll have several copies of it over and over and over again, and you just want one copy of that image. It doesn't really matter as much for our purpose, but just in case, set it to go to image mapping right here. Click on that and set it to clip. And so now you'll see up here that you only have one copy of that image. Now this is important also. Go to mapping down here, and instead of UV, select generated, and that's it. It just generated and flat. That's what comes up. Make sure that those two are set to generated and flat. And that's just about it for this material, for this texture of this material. Now, what you're going to want to do is go to in this bottom panel right here, go to viewport shading and select texture. And nothing's really going to happen. And you're going to go down to shading on the right here in this right panel and select GLSL. And so when you select that, it's going to turn black because we deleted the one light that came with the startup file when we started up Blender. And what you're going to want to do next is create a point light. So in the Create tab over here to the left, create a point lamp. And nothing's going to happen at first, but then you drag it up the Z-axis, and you'll see that the map will come right up. And right now it's going to look a little dim, so we're going to go, as long as you have this light selected, you'll have this little light menu right here, and you're going to go to this light menu on the right. And set the energy to, let's say 7. And it's a little bit bright. You can either turn that down, or what you can do is you can drag this light even further up the Z-axis, and at a height of about 11 or 12, that'll look fine. And so what you want to do now, so you have this camera facing the plane, and if you click numpad 0, or if you can also do this by going to View and going to Cameras, Cameras right here, and go to Active Camera. You'll see what the camera sees in Blender. So that's what the camera is looking at right now, and that's what'll get rendered if I go to Render and Render Image. That'll render the current frame, what the camera is looking at, rather, in the current frame. So you're going to want to obviously zoom in on something, and actually you're eventually going to want to make an animation. First of all, go to Render Settings right here. Doesn't really matter what you have selected. Just go to this little camera right here and select, first of all, make sure that this is 100 so that when you're rendering, it's actually going to be 100% 1080p, 100% HD. And select 30, because I suggest using 30 frames per second. It's a good amount, and it looks nice. So now, you're going to want to drag your camera into a point and to focus in on something that you want to start your animation with. So I want to go, say, from Wonderland, drag it down the blue line, and then go down the red line to Braintree, say. So what I'm going to do is actually, this is a lot more comfortable. It's a lot more comfortable if you stay in the active camera view. So just click numpad 0 or go to View and Active Camera, and you can just use these options in the right panel to bring the camera down and set its position. So drag the Z down, and I think that's zoomed in enough. And then what you can do is just simply drag the X up and drag the Y up to get to wherever you need. It's okay if you go outside the bounds. That'll just be rendered as gray space. So right there. And now you're going to want to save the position of the camera at this point. And first of all, you're actually going to want to decide how long you want your animation to be. So let's say we wanted this animation of the camera going from Wonderland to Braintree to be 7 seconds. So 7 times 30 FPS, which you just selected, is 210 frames total. So rely on it being that much, and set this N down here to 210. So it's going to go from 1 to 210. And just click outside or press enter and select this lock here so that when you're dragging, this is your pointer of where you are in the timeline. And so that's just that lock makes it so that the pointer can't go outside the set frame range. So we're going to be rendering from 1 to 210. That's going to be our animation. And now you're going to want to save the position of the camera in certain frames of your animation in order to basically animate it. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to the first frame and click I. That'll bring up a menu of inserting keyframes. And you'll see a lot of options, a lot of different types of keyframes that you can insert. And basically what each of these settings means is what you want to be keyframed. So there's location, rotation, scaling, location and rotation, location and scale, location, basically all the different combinations. And even though we're not really going to be rotating the camera, if your camera is going to be rotating your shot, I'll just insert a lock rot. That's what you should be doing. Insert a lock rot right here. So you'll see that the position and the rotation here turned yellow, and you now have this little yellow point at the beginning. That means you have a keyframe set at that frame. So at frame 1, we have a keyframe right now. We saved the camera's location. So now the next thing we're going to want to do is actually set the next keyframe of the camera, and I mean basically where you want it to go next. So what you're going to do is you're going to change its location, but not before you set this pointer. This is very important to do it in this order. First, you want to set this green pointer to be at the place where you want to save your camera's location next. So we'll go to, I would say, frame 80. It's about halfway, just in case. Always leave space in the end, and if you find that you don't use it all, then it'll render out a little bit of static animation in the end. It doesn't really matter. Go to frame 80, and now you can go ahead and drag the X and Y to, say, first we're going to go down to the Government Center and Park Street area, and so we'll stop here. We want the camera to be here first. Make sure that you get this intermediate point. And we'll click I again and insert another lock rot keyframe. So now you notice that the position and rotation turns yellow here, and now we have 2 keyframes. One is being hidden by the pointer, but if you scrub in between them now, you'll see that the camera glides from one to the other, and that means that you have successfully created an animation. You've successfully animated the position and technically the rotation of your camera. So if you click play animation down here, this play button, you'll notice that it goes smoothly from one to the other. And if you click render image in any one of the frames along the way, it'll render that current frame. Eventually, what you'll be doing at the end of this, sorry, it's a little bit, if you zoom in, it's a little bit blurry because the texture itself, the image of the texture, isn't really all that big. But if you render an image along the way, that'll render the current frame where the camera is at that point. And eventually, what you're going to want to do at the end of this process is render the animation so you'll click render animation instead of rendering image, and that will render one frame at a time, slowly but steadily. Really depends on the speed of your computer, and I mean, I would say that this animation really shouldn't take more than an hour to render, even on the slowest of computers. Really, it should take less than half an hour to render. And it'll render the whole animation, and it'll render in this case, from the start to the end frame, which is 1 to 210 in our case, because that's what we set. So press escape to get out of this rendered view, and also you can press escape if you realize that something's going wrong while you're rendering and you want to cancel rendering. Just press escape, and then you'll need to press it twice. So right now we're at frame 80. That was our last keyframe. You'll notice that it's yellow. And again, make sure that before you do the next keyframe, make sure that you move this green pointer to the location where you want to insert that keyframe. So probably let's go right before the end. Let's do 185. And now again, move it down. say to this area. And now I want to insert another keyframe, so go to I again, go to lock rot. And do the same for the last frame, put it all the way to the end, and change the X and the Y, or actually just the Y in our case. And now we're at Braintree, so click I one last time and lock rot. So now if we scrub completely through from the beginning to the end of our timeline, or if we just click play animation, it'll actually play in a loop. But if you click play animation, you'll notice that this video now, that this animation now includes everything because we've saved its position in various locations, and it'll follow those locations. And at this point, you're basically done. You're basically good to go ahead and click render animation, and it should render this out as a video. Now, one last thing, when you're rendering out the animation, you can set whatever settings you want here. Just make sure, start and end frame. Well, we set those down here. Those mirror those options. Frame step 1, obviously, and that's actually basically all you need to select. I wouldn't change a lot of other things, but the output. So I'll select the folder that I'm using for my Blender tutorial, and I'll save it here, and I'll name it something, so render, and I'll click accept and render, and now select the file extension to be a movie. So I would suggest maybe H.264 or MPEG, but maybe I haven't done this in a while, so I don't exactly remember which ones might suit your purpose better. AVI might be a little bit large, but this MPEG should be good. And so I'll post the video that I have rendered out, just not to make you guys wait, at the end of this presentation, and you can see for yourself the results. And I hope you have fun working on your project, and good luck.